my name is Kara and today I'm going to show you how to knit a dress. So it is the 2 to 9 dress and I'm currently wearing it. This one is made in Noro crayon in color 40, I think. And this dress is completely customized to your body, so there's no traditional sizing, and it's also pretty flexible with what yarn you're going to use. So you can use anything from like a sport weight to a worsted weight yarn, whatever works with the 5.5mm needles. And this is my first dress pattern and I'm really excited about it. It took me about a month to finish my first dress, about a week to finish my second dress, and then about 3 days to finish my last one. And 2 of them are midi and 1 of them is mini, and this one right here is a midi dress, though you can't tell because I'm sitting. And so this is a walkthrough for my 2 to 9 dress, so you're going to need the pattern for it, and you can get 15% off if you use code YouTube, and you can get that on my Etsy, my website, or my Ravelry. And you can make this dress a shift dress, you can make it more bodycon, and you can make it more fitted to your body. Because it's customized, you just follow the numbers for your body and make it fit however you want. So for materials, you're going to need yarn, surprisingly, and how much you need depends on what size, length, and shape you're making, but I detail more about that in the pattern itself. You also need 5.5mm circular needles, and they do need to be circular because you're knitting in the round. And I actually recommend having a second set just to make it easier to try on as you go and see like how much longer you want to make it. You'll need 2 stitch markers and a crochet hook because you're going to be doing provisional cast on. And for yarn suggestions, I have made 3 dresses so far, as I mentioned, and this one's in Noro crayon. I really liked it. It was really fun working with the self-striping yarn. But I also made it in Malibu worsted and the Wool in the Gang Take Care Mohair, and I really liked all of them. They gave very different vibes, each of them, and I'm excited to try out more yarns. But my testers also tried out a bunch of different yarns, and I'll list a bunch in the pattern itself. So to figure out your gauge number, and this is important for calculating the numbers throughout the pattern, this is kind of just determining what type of fit you want for your dress. So if you want more of a bodycon fit, I recommend making your gauge number about a 3. If you want more of a fitted, but like slightly looser than a bodycon, I recommend a 3.5 as your number. And if you want a shift dress, I recommend 4 as your gauge number. So for your bust number, you are going to take a tape measure and measure the widest part of your bust, and then just take note of that number for yourself. Then you're going to calculate how many stitches to cast on, and you're going to use provisional cast on here. And it's really important that you use provisional cast on because you're going to be picking up those stitches later and adding length to your dress. But first you're going to be shaping the top. First you're going to provisionally cast on your stitches, so you're going to make a slip knot and take your crochet hook, and you're going to chain a few stitches, and this will just be the end so that you can unzip it later. And then you're going to wrap your yarn around your knitting needle and start to crochet on some stitches. And you're going to do this for as long as it takes to cast on these stitches. Once you've cast on all the stitches, you are going to use your regular yarn and you're going to just knit 1 row across. And this is why it's important to have a kind of contrast yarn for your provisional cast on, so it's easier to tell the difference between the provisional cast on and the actual body yarn. And I recommend using a yarn that's of a similar weight as your body yarn. Once you've knit 1 row, you're going to join in the round, and this is how I do it. I take the last stitch and put it on my right needle, then I pull the first stitch and pull it over to my left needle. And that's just how I join in the round, and I tighten some of the yarns in case they got loose, place the stitch marker, and then begin to knit in the round. You're going to knit a few rows of stockinette, and then you're actually going to start shaping the front panel. So to determine the distance between these straps, you're going to take your tape measure and you're going to measure where you want the straps to sit. So I like the straps to sit around here, so then I would then look at the number and it's about 12-ish inches. From there, you're going to take that number and you're going to use it to calculate how many stitches you need to decrease to shape the front before casting out for the middle. So now you'll be working flat across these stitches of the front. So you're going to turn your work and you're going to slip the first stitch, then purl 2 together. So insert your needle into 2 stitches, then purl them together, and then you'll just continue to work across the row. Then on the other side, you're going to slip 1 stitch, then slip, slip, then insert your needle and wrap your yarn and knit those 2 together. That was a left-leaning decrease. Once you've decreased the appropriate number of stitches, you're going to add coverage to the front, and this is just to make the neckline a little bit higher and add more coverage. I do about 4 rows, but it's completely up to you, and I actually recommend trying on the front and just determining how much more length you want. As you're adding coverage, you're going to just slip the first stitch purlwise, and then you're just going to purl across the row. And slipping the first stitch gives a nice clean edge, and so on the other side, you're just going to slip 1 stitch knitwise and then knit across. Once you finish adding coverage to your front, you're going to divide for the straps. You're going to cast off the stitches for the middle and then start shaping the straps. You're going to knit the stitches of the strap and then you're going to cast off the stitches for the middle. Now your work is divided between the two straps and you're going to shape them. Once you've shaped the straps, you're going to use an I-cord method or a crochet method to make these straps. So here I decreased to 2 stitches and now I'm switching to my crochet hook and I'm just going to use a single chain to make a strap. Once you finish the straps for the front, you're just going to move on to shaping the back, and that's super similar to how you shape the front, except you're probably not going to add any more coverage because you want the back to be a little bit lower than the front. Once you finish shaping the top, you're going to pick up the stitches that you provisionally cast on and you're going to add length to your dress. And this is a little bit tricky, but I recommend just doing it nice and slow to make sure that you don't drop any stitches. So first you're going to find the tail that you crocheted on and you're just going to pull and unravel. And it might be a little bit tricky at first, but as you pull it should unravel. Then you're going to take your knitting needle and pick up the stitches as you unravel them. And it's a little bit tricky, so I actually find that it's helpful to pick up the stitches before unraveling. So you're just going to pick up every other leg of the stitches and then unravel. And I highly recommend this method because it's a little less likely that you're going to drop stitches. Once you picked up the stitches, you're going to place a stitch marker and reattach the yarn and begin to knit in the round. Now, if you're going to be doing shaping to your dress, you're going to be taking measurements for your waist. And you're just going to take your tape measure and measure the smallest part of your waist. And it's helpful if you kind of lean to the side and then where your body kind of folds in is where your smallest part of your waist is. Now you're going to be using right leaning and left leaning decreases in order to shape to the waist, and you're going to be spreading that over a certain number of rows. So look at the chart to see how you should space out those decreases. For your right leaning decrease, you're going to do a knit two together. So that's just inserting your needle into 2 stitches and then wrapping your yarn and pulling it through. So insert your needle into 2 stitches, wrap your yarn, and pull it through. For your left leaning decrease, you're going to do a slip slip knit 2 together. So you're going to slip 2 stitches individually as if to knit. Then you're going to insert your needle, wrap your yarn, and pull that stitch through. And this is the exact same as how you shape the front. You're just going to take your needle and insert into 2 stitches and slip them knitwise individually. Insert your left needle, wrap your yarn, and continue to knit. If your decreases didn't quite add enough length to reach your smallest part of your waist, just continue in stockinette until you reach the waist. Once you've added enough length to reach the smallest part of your waist, you're now going to shape for the hips. And again, this is optional if you're adding shaping to your dress. To take your hip measurement, you are going to take your tape measure and measure the widest part of your hips. Now you'll be doing increases while you go from the smallest part of your waist to the widest part of your hips. So you're going to do right leaning and left leaning increases. For your right leaning increase, you're going to do a right lifted increase. So pick up the leg of the stitch on the right needle and you're going to pick it up from the back to the front and then just knit the stitch normally. And that gives you a right lifted increase. For your left leaning increase, you're going to do a left lifted increase. For your left lifted increase, you're going to pick up that leg again, but you're going to go from the front to the back. And then you're going to knit that stitch through the back loop, which is a little bit tricky, but it'll make sure that you don't have any gap in your stitch. Once you've increased the appropriate number of stitches, or if you were making a shift dress, you're just going to do this the entire time. You're just going to add length to your dress. And this is where I recommend trying it on as you go and using that second set of needles if you have it. So if you add about half of the stitches to the second set of needles, it'll help you like try on the dress as you go and like not drop stitches, because it's pretty likely that you have a cord length that's too small to like fit around your like legs as you try on. So if you put about half of your stitches there, it makes the opening a little bit wider so you don't drop stitches. And I highly recommend trying it on as you go, because you might find that you actually want a mini dress instead of a midi dress, or a midi dress instead of a maxi dress, or the other way around, because You never know where the yarn's going to take you. Once you've reached the appropriate length, and keep in mind that blocking will maybe add about an inch or two to the length, you're going to do a woven bind off. And so this is just using a needle and binding off, and this will make sure that you have a nice stretchy edge. For a woven bind off, you're going to cut your yarn for a certain length, and I'm sorry, I don't have a great way of estimating how long it should be, but there's a few options on the internet to help you. And you're going to thread your needle. Take a locking stitch marker and lock the first 2 stitches. You can also use a scrap yarn as well, just a way to make sure that you can hold on to those first 2 stitches. And then you're going to insert your needle knitwise into the first stitch and pull it off and thread it through. Then you're going to thread your needle through the middle between the 2 stitches and from the back to the front and just pull it through. And your yarn might be pretty long, but just bear with me. Then you're going to insert your needle knitwise into the second stitch and thread it through. And finally, you're going to insert your needle knitwise through the first stitch and pull it off the needle and pull it through. And you'll just continue this with all the stitches until you have 1 stitch left. And when you have 1 stitch left, you'll just continue the pattern with the first 2 stitches that you left on hold. And then you'll just weave in the ends after that. Now the final piece, and this is optional. If you want to shift dress, feel free to omit this part, or you could also add this part and just kind of tie it loosely. You're going to pick up these stitches for straps on the sides of your dress. So in order to do that, you are going to try on your dress and determine where you want these straps to sit. I actually like to have these straps sit about the smallest part of my waist, just so that I can really make sure that it fits to me. And then I use a stitch marker or a scrap piece of yarn just to mark that place where I want these straps to be. Then I pick up stitches from that spot and I begin to make an I-cord, or I can use my single chain crochet to make a strap. You're going to take your needle and insert it into a V, and then you're going to wrap your yarn and pull it through to the other side. And you'll continue this for as many stitches as you need for these straps. Now you might find that you see that the dress curls up at the bottom, and this is kind of dependent on what yarn you used. Like my mohair dress didn't have any curl at the bottom, but that's because it's mohair. My other 2 dresses in the Malabrigo worsted and the Noro crayon did curl up at the bottom, so I blocked it. So if you block it, you want to make sure that you don't stretch out your dress too much unless you want to add length to it. And you just want to make sure that everything sits flat, and after it dries, it will hopefully not curl up at the edges. And there are plenty of videos on the internet to show you how to block pieces, but I usually fill up my sink with water and make sure it's cold water. And I add a little bit of knitting soap that's non-rinse, so it's just Knit IQ, I think, but there's plenty of options on the internet as well. And then I put my piece in. I make sure not to agitate it too much. I make sure that everything is like soaked through and saturated with water. Then I just leave it alone for 20 minutes and set a timer, make sure that the water's not draining, make sure that there aren't too many bubbles, and make sure that you're not just like really like moving the dress in the water. Just let it sit. After 20 minutes, you're going to take your piece out and drain it of water. Make sure you don't wring it. I actually like to squeeze out the water as I go. Some people use a towel to help dry the piece, but I'm a bit lazy and I find that this works for me without having to use the towel. Then you're going to take your piece and just lay it flat to dry, and make sure that it's not too stretched out, again, unless you want to add length, and that all the edges are flat. And I recommend putting it in a place where it's not going to be disturbed for a few days, because it'll likely take like a few days to dry, because wool takes forever to dry. And that is the entire dress. Hopefully that entire video made sense to you. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave a comment or reach out to me. Thank you so much for supporting me and my patterns. This was a joy to make, and I'm really excited to make this dress in every season of the year. I've been forcing myself to hold back because I don't really have the room to make any more dresses this summer, but I'm definitely making another dress in the fall, hopefully like in a mohair, because I think that'd be kind of fun. But anyways, thank you so much for supporting me and my patterns. Hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Happy knitting, and see ya.